So thank you so much, everybody, for coming this morning, afternoon, or maybe even one or two people for this evening from my part of the world. I'm Christina Hoppner, Mahara Project Lead and Product Manager, and I work for Catalyst IT in Te Whanganui Atara, Aotearoa, New Zealand, where it's definitely been an interesting day weather-wise, as I've been talking or sharing before the session started. So hopefully this session here now will be less weather-prone, and my internet and power will last to the very end. Our topic today is the Mahara Roadmap. What are we discussing? And I would like to show you a few things that we have already developed for Mahara 2404 and also be sharing a number of things that we are discussing, that we are thinking about implementing over the next roughly 5 to 6 years in order to give you an idea where the journey with Mahara might be going. From our perspective, that already includes a number of ideas that have been shared by community members such as yours. And so today really is your invitation to start participating in letting us know what you think about these ideas, which ones you like better than others, whether you have particular interests, whether there are certain points that you'd like to discuss, because all of that is very important to us so that we can think further about how something might be implemented, whether maybe to pull something forward, push something backwards, or who would like to partner with us in making some of those functionalities a reality. So now, how did we come here today? Over the last few months, in particular since April this year, we started looking into how we can make the Mahara project more sustainable. And that resulted in the subscription model that was introduced in July this year in 2023. In order to ensure that Mahara, the software and also the project, can continue for many, many years, is supported, provides an open source solution and alternative for you to create portfolios at your organizations. And so the subscription model allows for that sustained and continued development because the majority of the work that was done on Mahara and also supporting the community and the project happened through Catalyst over the last 17 years. And unfortunately, just offering professional development services, hosting services in our part of the world, and then also through our sister companies around the world, was not enough to sustain the community and the infrastructure and the services that we provided for free to our community members. And therefore, we wanted to look for a way to ensure that we can still be here in the next years, that the development team can continue and can also grow, and that you have Mahara available. And so that's where the subscription model comes in. Now, through that additional funding that we will have available, it makes it possible for us to have a more defined roadmap than we had in the past, because it will be possible for us to take on some more projects than we could previously. So that could also be the possibility for larger projects that sometimes require more than 1, 2, or 3 cycles of releases. And one thing that some community members had mentioned is that previously it was not quite so clear how community members can actually participate in our community, how they can contribute in the many different ways. And so we definitely want to change that and make that more transparent to you because Mahara is a community project. It is not solely developed by Catalyst, while we have the main number of contributions and the bulk of the contributions, we do have fantastic other contributors. And there I'd like to mention in particular our translators who have been doing a fantastic job keeping Mahara available in many different languages to allow you to use it not just in English. And so if you have any ideas and want to participate in or let us know how we can make things easier for you to understand, how to make things more transparent, please do get in touch with me so that we can make sure that all that information is available to you. Before we look into the roadmap, though, I would very much like to thank everybody who has been involved in that process. So in that process since April, since before April in certain cases, when we have been starting conversations, thinking about what the future of Mahara can look like, I'd like to thank everybody who has already contributed to Mahara, either through code contributions, ideas, and translations, and also through funding, because those things continue to be very important in order to also bring those specific features to the software that you would like to see. And I'd also very much like to thank everybody who has already purchased a subscription, either directly through us or through our business partners that have signed on very quickly in order to provide their clients the possibilities of purchasing a subscription through them, therefore not having to go into lengthy contract negotiations, maybe even with a company overseas with us in New Zealand, that can sometimes be very tricky. So please do check out the business partners page on the website, mahara.org/business-partners, where you can find information about the organizations that can also sell subscriptions. But now let's take a look at our roadmap. So our roadmap is divided into 3 parts: short-term, medium-term, and long-term. Short-term is about until next release, which is coming up really, really quickly. Well, we might say it is next year, but next year is starting very soon. And so we are planning to release at the end of April, by the end of April. So that is kind of our short-term time frame, roughly having features, all of these things ideally available by that time or shortly thereafter. Medium term is about 1 to 2 years, and long term then about 3 to 5 years. And long term really also has those features that need a lot of discussions, that need more specifications, that need more conversations. So while you might see items in medium or long term, that doesn't mean that the conversations can only start during those time frames, but we should be starting those conversations already right now to gather all the information, to have the ideas together, to do the brainstorming, and then refine and revise and iterate over them in order to then, when we get more to the development work, when we have projects or partners that are interested in supporting those things, that we can then get going more quickly. Now, while we have those 3 time horizons, we also have 3 categories on our roadmap: create, engage, and manage. So create is everything around the portfolio creation, around artifacts, portfolios, pages, collections, and the like. Engage is engaging and collaborating, so sharing permissions, working with others, working in groups, portfolio submissions, and the like. And manage, that's that aspect that kind of is often probably for most of you more in the background, namely more on the infrastructure side, the architecture, technical updates, and so on, that just keep Mahara running smoothly and allowing also for new protocols or updates to programming languages to come around. So let me briefly introduce you to the short-term goals and then show you already a number that we have developed. If you hear some rumbling in the background, It's not the bad weather, it's just airplanes that can finally take off again now that things have weather-wise died down. All right, short-term create. One idea that we had been discussing for several years now already, but have not quite been able to implement, is that it would be good to make it so that any page can be used in multiple collections or also on its own and doesn't just have to live in one collection. Secondly, we'd very much like to explore AI, artificial intelligence, more with you and give you the opportunity to try things out. I often find that it helps me to experiment when I can actually do the thing and not just think about it, because then I know exactly what steps I would need to take, what happens when I do X, and so on. And that is where the proof of concept comes in for the AI reflection bot Riff that is now or will be integrated in Mahara 2404. Furthermore, it would be good to not just be able to reflect via text, but more easily also record audio and video directly from within a block, rather than needing to do that separately and uploading the separate file. A number of people had been mentioning trash bins, retrieving of text, or retrieving of entire portfolios. And so we have made a start at that by being able to retrieve deleted text and note content, again, kind of as a proof of concept, as an initial idea of what that could look like in order to help our thinking of how some of that larger functionality could be implemented. And we've also started on investigating a more contemporary portfolio look that we will then continue in medium term. Now, in the area of Engage, there are two elements that pertain to smart evidence, namely to have an additional assessment status available so that assessors can have one more status there, and also that you can actually have multiple assessors on a smart evidence competency framework. Furthermore, we are thinking that it would be good to have easier bug reporting and feature suggestions available. For example, that you can simply send a report from your own Mahara instance. And that is possible since we now moved our bug tracker and wishlist item tracker to GitLab, where we can then tie into those APIs. Now, on the more technical side, OpenID Connect support, so OIDC, might be more of an acronym you're familiar with, especially if you're working with Microsoft Azure AD or any Google services, that you don't necessarily have to go via a SAML bridge, but can natively connect. We have a proof of concept for that directly from mahara.org and are also looking into using Keycloak for mahara.org in order to provide single sign-on to our three main sites, that is mahara.org itself, the wiki, and then also our Git instance. I've already mentioned that we want to investigate a more contemporary portfolio look, and that is the kickoff really also for a wider usability review of Mahara. And we do want to go a bit step by step and not lose the big picture out of sight, and therefore want to do that in parallel and look at different parts of the platform. One thing that had come up, not just amongst developers, but also others for accessibility purposes, was to implement a dark theme so that we have dark background and white writing, and that can be quite challenging. And so we are looking into how we can overcome those challenges. And lastly, but not least, we are looking into developing a principles-based framework for data and tech so that we make it more transparent to our community members how we as project perceive data and tech and what our principles are in working with it. So those are things in regards to data privacy. In some areas, there's also the term used data residency, principles around open source connections, integrations, and the like. Now, that was a lot already for the short term that I've told you about. Now, since that is the short term and April is right around the corner, I would very much like to show you some of those things directly. And let's start with smart evidence. And this was a project made possible through a partnership with AP Hogeschool Antwerpen in Belgium, who funded the implementation of changes to smart evidence. In the past, you could either have a framework that a student could assess themselves on, or that a teacher could assess them on. Now it is possible that you can have student and teacher assessment together. And on top of that, you can have 3 additional people assessing a portfolio. So that could be a second teacher who needs to review what the first teacher had done, an internship mentor, for example, an external assessor, and an external assessor. That's then 5 besides the student. And so as you can see here, there are now many, many more icons available on a smart evidence cell. And currently I'm logged in as a student, so I can click on it and I see instantly I'm a student, and that was my last assessment. And I also see the assessments from the others that have access to the portfolio and that can perform the role, in this case, of external assessor, mentor, program administrator, and university assessor. You also see here that new status, the star, the merit status, so the highest one after meeting the standard. And if you have been using smart evidence, might still be aware, you can change the wording in the assessment. So now it is possible that the student has their words, the university assessor can have their assessment criteria, program director, mentor, and so on. You can also change what these roles are called to really fine-tune them to what requirements you have in your program. And all of that really is coming together in this version of Smart Evidence version 2. You can still use Smart Evidence version 1. We have not deprecated that because it is possible to create frameworks, for example, for that directly through Mahara. For Mahara Smart Evidence version 2, we have not yet updated the online editor because this is quite a bit more complicated and the project was more focused on getting the features finished for the students and also for the assessors. Another nice thing that you might be interested in is that you can, when you're defining smart evidence, you also define which role needs to have what permissions in Mahara, so that you can say the university assessor, for example, must be a staff member. However, the mentor could just be a regular member of the institution or have an account on Mahara and not need that elevated permission because, of course, mentors are typically not in a staff role. Now, the second thing that I'd like to show you, I think I have on here as well. And some of these new features are not really on the roadmap because we put a selection of new things on there. We don't want to put every single feature on here. But one thing also that is actually quite large is that we, through funding from our districts here, our healthcare districts in New Zealand, we have been able to put the third-party plugin for continuing professional development directly into Mahara Core so that you have more of the core functionalities available in order to directly create CPD activities from within a Mahara page, to delete things, to add things, to manage things, and then also to have only one CPD and tag activities, and then be able to decide what CPDs you want to display based on based on tags and also timeframes. So there's a number of new features that we could also implement through that partnership in order to enhance the existing CPD plugin that numerous organizations have been using. And so if, for example, I use my tag teaching here on the left-hand side, currently you see all my CPD activities, and now there is only one included. What I wanted to show you as well is that I can, because I promised you to show you some AI things. Riff is an AI reflection bot that works quite differently from the normal implementations of ChatGPT. And so I put a couple of links to resources for that into our shared notes that you can follow up on. And so what we have done is, if you wanted to explore Riff, you can now do that from within the Mahara page once you have signed up for it. Currently it is in private beta, but Leticia does create accounts for educators so that you can give it a go. But it is possible then to really just use a URL for the chatbot that you created and put that into a Mahara page to experience how that could work in the context of a portfolio. And so over the next few months, we want to explore the idea of the chatbot further. What does it mean for the portfolio? How would we maybe be able to access data? What improvements would be required from a chatbot in order to integrate more easily with it, for example. Now, if I stay on this page, I also have a text box at the bottom. And when I take a look at that, I wrote some text and I add some more text. And now I realize, oh, I actually need to get back to my previous text. So that is where that retrieve content from a text on NoteBlock comes in, because now I have the possibility to restore the last backup, so the last text that had been in there before I clicked the save button, and restore that. Of course, now with my short text, that is very short, but if you have longer text, that can be quite interesting and will save some people some headaches. And that is our start of exploring how we can retrieve content that was deleted and bring it back. Now, if I wanted to put a new block onto the page, in the past you always had content types available, and a recent addition to Mahara that will be available in 2404 is that we have these recent content types. So those are the recent content types you have used on this particular, that I have used on this particular page, to make them quickly available again, because you might be wanting to work with these items again and put them onto the page again. So they bubble up because, for example, in the case of external media, if I wanted to put a video onto the page, I would need to click the Show More button quite a few times in order, in this case, to come up to the bottom. So this content type sort order is defined in the site administration's plugin area, but with the recent content types, that is entirely for your own within your own portfolio. So these were just a few of the many new features that will be available in Mahara 2404. But I'm not going to go through all of them at this stage, because we do want to also look at the longer roadmap of Mahara. So let me continue there. But if you want to check some of them out, you can do that either if you have a test environment yourself and have access to the Mahara code base through your subscription, that you can pull the code and explore those things, or you can also test them directly while we are still working on some of these elements, and then at a later stage also on our developer environment. Now, looking at medium-term items. So that was kind of 1 to 2-ish years on our roadmap. In the create category, we have the element that, as the result of our investigation for a more contemporary portfolio look, that we actually look into implementing that and not just leave it at the discussion and at the findings from our BA and UX team, but implement a new portfolio look. Following on from the AI theme, we want to review findings from artificial intelligence projects that had been looking at using AI for portfolio work and see what meaningful integrations could look like, and how we could make some of those possible within Mahara if we as community decide that these things are useful to have. Furthermore, for smart evidence, we already have specs available, just need a project for it to finish it, is that it had come up a few times already that organizations do want to map artifacts against standards, not just pages, and also that using a rubric to do so would be good in order to be more flexible, because there are a number of standards out there that have more of a multi-column rubric rather than just a single column rubric. Furthermore, we are also looking into connecting external file storage. For example, Google Drive, OneDrive, or in Europe, and that's why I've added it just earlier today, Nextcloud, as an open source solution. And what that could mean, for example, is that when you have your Drive connected, that you can decide to either just display a file within the Mahara portfolio or to add it into the file storage in Mahara, depending on what is possible from the other end. So that would build on top of work that Gregor Anselch had done several years ago through a plugin that is available. Now, often portfolio work does need to be scaffolded, and that's where forms can come in very usefully. So we are also thinking about how we can implement forms, make them possible to be configured on the administration area example to scaffold learner responses. In the area of engage, so everything around sharing, working in groups, collaborating, there are three elements that pertain more to the sharing, and two doesn't mean they are much smaller than the others, just a different weight there in regards to assessment in particular. So having better assessment options available directly within Mahara, but also exploring how we can utilize integrations such as LTI for better assessment options within learning management systems. And also looking into making it possible that group portfolios can actually be submitted to either a Mahara group or to the learning management system. Then how can we more easily share portfolios on social media? Is one thing, so that you don't need to go through a number of steps, but that the workflow is more streamlined. And the same also around inviting somebody to comment. These days, a lot of people are used to typing at name, and then that person gets a notification. We are also exploring safer secret URLs so that learners can be assured that while their portfolio is kind of public, that only the specified people can access it, even if they don't have an account. On the more technical side of things, we are thinking about becoming an LTI consumer so that Mahara can be the main platform and others can connect to it, so that we can, for example, also access Big Blue Button from within Mahara, or access similarity checker plagiarism tools more easily, or even have small activities more easily available. Accessibility through WCAG 2.2 and onwards, compliance is important, and while that is continuing work, we will most likely have a wider review again and see what specific focus areas we would need to establish. In the short term, we were going to start a wider usability review, and then, of course, similarly to the investigation of contemporary portfolio look, that needs some implementation. So we are not just discussing things. We are also thinking about how to make working with templates easier. And a template library can mean so many things. So there is still quite a bit of discussion necessary of what that can then mean in particular. But really a lot of those things are around usability, interface, ease of use. And also how we can get data references in JSON format so that those can be exported, for example, for GDPR purposes. And yes, Sam, there are many, many features to explore and ideas for which we really want to invite you to let us know what you think about them. And of course, for a lot of them, I will be adding more detail over the coming weeks and therefore also posting in the news forum and on our monthly newsletter through Catalyst in order to keep you updated about all of those things. And invite you to get in touch with me as well if you want to discuss things specifically. Now, long term, about 3 to 5 years, tighter integration with Mahara Mobile. Currently, we can use Mahara Mobile to collect evidence, so image files, audio, video, and also journal entries, but they don't necessarily immediately make it onto a portfolio page unless you have the entire journal embedded or you place a file into a specific folder and the folder is displayed on the portfolio. Furthermore, we had been thinking about how we can immediately also have smart evidence competencies available in Mahara Mobile in order to integrate those things more easily, make things faster for students to fill their portfolio, to add things into their portfolio and then work from there rather than needing to find those things again. That correlates nicely also with an offline portfolio editor, how that or what that might look like, because while lots of people of course are online all the time, there are still areas and professions that do not have internet readily available, or also sometimes students might not have mobile data available in order to create their portfolio anywhere, anytime, and therefore what could an offline portfolio editor look like? And also what could it look like to have multilingual content available? Because while we can translate the Mahara interface, the content is still in the language that you enter. But could that be where artificial intelligence can help to make that process faster, or should it be possible for you to enter content in multiple languages and it is then saved to be toggled? So that's why that is also in the long-term view, because that definitely still needs more discussions. In the area of engage, so sharing and collaborating, we are thinking of making it easier to work with open badges so that we could look into becoming an open badge issuer, and also more flexible displayer. Again, coming back to smart evidence, that it could be used, for example, there. So instead of getting the last tick mark that a competency has been achieved, that, for example, a badge can be displayed and the underlying criteria can be shown directly. Collaborative synchronous editing is also quite interesting, and that can look many different ways that we do not have time today to discuss. And it is on the long-term view, because there are just so many ideas. What could it look like that we'd love to discuss with you and see in which areas it would also make more sense to maybe even start a small proof of concept. Often for Mahara, we also, and portfolios in general, we talk about the lifelong portfolio. So it kind of really also makes sense to look into Mahara becoming the learning record store, where all learning records are stored, where they are available for future, because Mahara can be that central repository, that central aggregator that holds all of that information. In the technical realm, Easier plugin management. Those of you that have been working with third-party plugins that we have available in Mahara have come across that it's easy to install, not so easy to deinstall. So that is one area that we should definitely improve on, and also make it easier to connect to web services, because they will be becoming more and more important in the future. So lots of you might have heard the term API. And so making that more readily available, more easily available without needing a computer science degree and deep knowledge is something that can help integrate Mahara more into your learning ecosystem. And then also looking into a more flexible role system. Currently, all our roles like institution admin, institution support admin, institution staff, site staff, and so on are all hard-coded in Mahara in different areas. But especially, I think the majority of you on today's call are also familiar with Moodle, and that has a fantastic permissions framework, very granular, so that you can also set up other roles. And that kind of is what we are thinking about for Mahara, to make it easier to define what is possible within which role, so that organizations can tailor the standard Mahara roles more to their requirements. And then in a second step, that could also log into and check in with you if that is even needed, to see if we need to define additional roles, need to leave it open for organizations to define additional roles. Now, all the time, of course, there is the upkeep of third-party libraries and technical changes that we cannot avoid this year and next year. And for some of you, the conversations probably already all started last year, is the update to PHP 8 that deprecates a number of things, in particular also the use of the protocol called XML-RPC that Mnet uses, so Moodle networking between Moodle and Mahara or between different Moodle sites. And so that, of course, has big implications for organizations who then need to move to LTI. And so there's lots of work going on underneath that many of you don't see, that we just need to keep abreast of. And so in some years it might look like that we do not have a lot of features to implement, but there's actually lots going on the back end, just to make sure that we are not falling behind those technical requirements. Now, while this roadmap might look pretty straightforward, I already mentioned at the start that we are looking for partners in this, and also we are starting these conversations now with you. So there might be some winding path for certain elements. Others might be straightforward to implement, do not need a lot of conversation to get a first version out, whereas others might have so many different options that we do need to have quite a few conversations and see where the journey is taking us. So there's possibilities, lots of possibilities for all of your ideas and discussions and considerations to be heard. And at the moment, we do not yet have the voting system completely worked out. So what you can see on the Padlet, to which there is also the link directly in the shared notes, is that you can give thumbs up and thumbs down, which are an indication for us to know that people are more interested, might not be as interested or as keen on what we in the development team think, and certain items we simply have to do. Others, we can be a bit more flexible in how we are thinking about them, and also in the implementation. So earlier today, or your evening in many cases, last night, we've already had some comments, and so I'd very much like to invite you to also add your own comments. Each element that is on the roadmap that I've just shown you is also replicated here in a more column look, so that we have the short term, medium term, long term, and then the create category is each element is prefixed with create, and then further down we've got engage, manage, and in each category there is also space for your own suggestions. So please do feel free to make a comment there. If you are not logged into Padlet, but you do want to make it possible for me to contact you directly, please either leave your name there or send me an email so that we can do so then. Now, if you want to keep in touch with all things Mahara, we do have a monthly newsletter. Many of you might be familiar with mahara.org/newsletter. That is our quarterly newsletter that I'm editing, and I'm also inviting submissions for that until early next week so that we can get those news in on the 1st or 2nd of January next year, which is coming up shortly. But I'm also curating a monthly newsletter that comes from Catalyst and brings in news on a more on a quicker basis, and also allows me to share some more things from our company. So if you'd like to subscribe to that one, please do so using the URL that is also in the shared notes. And now, already slightly over a year old, is the podcast Create, Share, Engage that I started in September last year. And in that, we share stories from portfolio practitioners from the Mahara community and also the wider portfolio community to bring interesting use cases of portfolios, interesting ideas directly to your ears. It is an audio-only podcast available on all the audio-only platforms, including also Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and so on, but also on the open source players. And there I do like my application that is AntennaPod, because it makes it really easy to manage everything, and also has fantastic options for ad-free listening and skipping around. But hopefully you won't skip our podcast and tune in. And also, if you'd like to share your organization story, please do get in touch with me so that we can set up a time that I can interview you. Now, if you'd like to get in touch and for some reason might not yet already have my email address or my other social media contact options, here they are. And once I've decided which video I want to share for this session, you will also receive the link to the slides again, but you do also have them already in the shared notes. So I look forward to learning more how your organizations work with Mahara, what you use portfolios for, what you'd like to be able to do in the future, and how roadmap items mesh up with your ideas for portfolios. And so that now still gives us time to discuss any questions that you might have. So one feedback was, I often receive feedback that instructors wish to be able to comment within all kinds of blocks, for example, by highlighting text with a color and writing comments. Yes, that had come up a couple of times already. And that is true. And Martin, you might want to get in touch with Carsten and Alex from Universität Bremen, because I do remember that Alex had a prototype that would make it possible. So he might be able to share that with you or give you an idea whether he's still working on that. Are there any planned updates for the Mahara LTI integration in Canvas? There, I'd be interested to know in what sense. We do work on Mahara LTI 1.3 Advantage, or Mahara LTI 1.3 Advantage is already implemented in its basic features. And we've tested it in we've tested it with Moodle, with Brightspace, with Canvas. I have not yet had the opportunity to do so because I don't know Canvas so well. So if that is something that you'd like to explore together, then please do let me know. For the Moodle members amongst you on this call, we are currently looking into what it takes to convert the Moodle assignments or Mahara assignment submission plugin in Moodle to use LTI 1.3 instead of LTI 1.1, because LTI 1.1 is based on OAuth 1, which will also at some point very soonish most likely be deprecated in PHP 8. And so yes, especially when it comes to integration with other systems, we may not always have access to those. We may not know them very well. And therefore, if you can give us more pointers, then that would make it easier for us to understand what is still missing. Another comment, the roadmap looks great, but a question we apply, the question in regards to the subscription, please do point that directly to your supplier who is also in the room, so Sam or Jasmine can talk to you about that. Do you have any other questions or comments in regards to the roadmap? Is there something glaringly missing or something that you have already been working on and would like to share? And please do feel free to grab the microphone if you want to do so. If your icon in Big Blue Button on the left-hand side already shows a microphone in red, you are ready to click the microphone button. If it shows headphones, then click the telephone icon, and then it'll take you through the audio setup. Any plans for Microsoft 365 integration? That I would put into Connect external file storage, which is kind of what I said with OneDrive there, because that would mainly concern files. I know that Gregor had OneDrive, the personal OneDrives connected at some point, but not necessarily the institutional ones. And so again, it would be good to partner with an organization that actually has those accounts in order to see whether the API keys would be different or if there are different calls that will need to be made in order to support that. The other aspect that I guess for Microsoft 365 comes in is the OIDC connection, so OpenID Connect for authentication purposes. That is currently already possible, but in Microsoft Azure AD, a SAML bridge would need to be enabled in order to use single sign-on. With OpenID Connect, though, that wouldn't be necessary, so that it should be easier to set those up by the Azure AD administrators. Yes, Sam, the recording of audio video within a block, that is something that we can hopefully still sneak into Mahara 2404, because that would certainly be something useful. I think TinyMCE does offer it, but of course, not everybody would be able to work with the premium plugin. So we are exploring the options of how we can make those things available. Any plans for tidying up portfolios, folders perhaps? That can be part of the wider usability review. Yeah. So please add that comment directly there so that we can keep it in mind. Currently, it is already possible to tag portfolios and then view them based on those tags instead of the long list of all portfolios, and therefore organize them in that way. And so it would be good to know what you mean by putting them into folders and so on, and what you might also like that to look visually, in order for us to have a better idea what that means for you. And so, of course, for us in the team, that also means that we do need to provide some more information on these roadmap items. And that is what I'll be doing over the next few weeks to also add some more details there. And then also create the enhancement items in our issue tracker so that we can have those conversations and then link to all of those. If you are keen on seeing what other things we have brewing and already implemented for Mahara 2404, let me briefly go there so that you have an idea. While some of you might be writing some more comments. So milestone 2404 and label is dev enhancement. So those of you who do already have access to the issue tracker can then find those things. So something technical. I mentioned Riff already, that we are also implementing more sort options for portfolios within a group. For example, portfolios that have been shared. Allow lazy loading of images to speed up page loading. Simplifying how to remove members from groups when deleting accounts. I think that was also more on the server end. I mentioned LTI 1.3 for submissions. A few other things. There's some technical items that have come up, and then these are the open items, but there are more. So altogether 27 features. So also the setting submissions on the portfolio overview page as sticky so that you don't always have to add them again if you just always want to see all portfolios. We will have a new group available for auditing purposes. CPD enhancements that you recently used blog post, and quite a number of technical enhancements that we have put in. For Smart Evidence, a better way of grouping annotations on a page would be welcome. Please do add that under your suggestions, and if you have any additional ideas or suggestions of what you might want that to look like, that would be fantastic to have so that we have a better idea there. So seeing that the time is getting close to the top of the hour, I would like to thank all of you for having taken the time at this time of your day to spend with me and the Mahara roadmap, items that we are in the development team thinking about, already informed through community conversations, but now hopefully also getting your input and letting us, so that you can let us know what you think about the items, what other ideas you have that we should be considering, that you want to discuss with us, so that we can keep Mahara relevant for all of you, for the community. Thank you very much for having been here today. And so I'd like to wish you a nice rest of your week and hope to see you soon in the community.